Marcus hadn't eaten for 2 days, so when he found $5 million in a forgotten suitcase, his heart almost stopped. To the elite world of the Grand Bistro, Marcus was invisible, just a pair of black trousers and a white shirt moving silently through the shadows of wealth. But to Marcus, every clink of a crystal glass felt like a hammer against his empty ribs. His stomach wasn't just hungry, it was screaming, a hollow ache that made his hands tremble as he carried trays of lobster he could never taste. It was exactly 8:45 p.m. The rain was lashing against the tall glass windows of the restaurant, blurring the city lights into streaks of neon. That's when he walked in. The man looked like a ghost from a different era. He wore a heavy, salt-stained trench coat that smelled of old books and damp pavement. His beard was unkempt, and his shoes, cheap plastic-soled things, were split at the sides. As he sat down at table 4, the atmosphere in the room shifted. A wealthy couple at the next table whispered and pulled their silk coats closer, as if poverty were a disease they could catch. The head waiter, a man named Julian, whose soul was as cold as the ice in his drinks, sneered. "Marcus," he hissed, "go see what that resident of the streets wants, and tell him we don't serve water for free." Marcus didn't sneer. He took a deep breath, fighting a wave of dizziness, and walked to table 4. He didn't see a beggar. He saw a man. "Good evening, sir," Marcus said, his voice as smooth and professional as if he were serving a king. "It's a cold night. Can I start you with some hot tea on the house? It'll help warm you up." The old man looked up. His eyes weren't dull like a beggar's. They were sharp, piercing blue like ice under a microscope. He looked at Marcus's name tag, then at his shaking hands. "You're hungry, aren't you, Marcus?" the old man asked. His voice was deep like the vibration of a cello. Marcus stiffened, his pride stinging. "I'm fine, sir. Just a long shift. What can I get for you?" The old man ordered a simple bowl of tomato soup. For the next 40 minutes, Marcus treated table 4 like it was the VIP booth. He brought extra croutons, the finest napkins, and even shared a small, genuine joke about the weather. He ignored the glares from Julian. He ignored the fact that he was working for a tip that would likely be 0. When the man finished, he stood up abruptly. He didn't wait for the bill. He simply nodded at Marcus and walked toward the revolving doors, his tattered coat fluttering behind him. "Hey, he didn't pay!" Julian shouted, starting to move. "I'll cover it," Marcus said quickly, reaching into his pocket for the last few coins he had saved for his bus ride home. As Marcus went to wipe the table, he noticed it. Tucked deep under the booth, where the shadows were darkest, was a suitcase. It wasn't tattered like the man's coat. It was made of flawless matte black leather with heavy silver buckles. It looked like it belonged in a bank vault, not a dusty restaurant corner. Marcus's heart began to drum a frantic beat. He looked at the door, but the old man had vanished into the rainy night. Marcus picked up the suitcase. It was incredibly heavy. He carried it to the small, dimly lit supply closet at the back of the kitchen. With shaking fingers, he flicked the silver latches. Snap, snap. The lid creaked open. Marcus's breath died in his throat. Inside, there were no clothes, no papers, just bricks. Bricks of crisp, uncirculated $100 bills bound in blue paper bands. The smell of fresh ink hit him, the smell of power, the smell of a new life. $5 million. Marcus collapsed against the cold brick wall of the closet, the suitcase still open in his lap. He thought of his daughter, Maya, sleeping in a room with a leaking ceiling. He thought of his own empty stomach. He was one theft away from never being hungry again. But as the green light of the money reflected in his eyes, he realized the old man hadn't forgotten the bag. He had left it.
Before we dive in, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. We'd love to see how far these stories travel. And subscribe to Move to Hope, because these stories are built by the support of good people like you. Marcus snapped the suitcase shut. the heavy silver latches clicking like the locking of a prison cell. He tucked it under his arm, wrapping his old, stained raincoat around it. His stomach, which had been screaming for food just minutes ago, was now tied in a tight, cold knot. Hunger had been replaced by a much sharper sensation: fear. He avoided the main exit, slipping through the kitchen's back door into the relentless rain. Every splash of his boots against the pavement sounded like footsteps following him. Every flickering street lamp felt like a spotlight. He clutched the suitcase so hard his knuckles turned white. He was carrying $5 million through a neighborhood where people were robbed for 5 cents. When he finally reached his apartment building, a crumbling brick structure that smelled of damp concrete and broken dreams, he didn't take the elevator. It had been broken since last winter. He climbed the 4 flights of stairs, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his vision swimming from the 2-day fast. Inside his apartment, the only sound was the rhythmic, wheezing breath of his 7-year-old daughter, Maya. She was curled up on the sofa, shivering under a mountain of thin blankets. The radiator was cold, as usual. Marcus didn't turn on the lights. He sat on the floor, the suitcase between his knees, and finally, slowly, opened it again. The green glow of the cash seemed to illuminate the room's poverty. It made the peeling wallpaper look shameful. It made the empty fridge in the corner look like a tombstone. "Just one," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. "Just one bundle, and Maya never has to be cold again. Just one, and I can buy her the medicine that actually works, not the cheap stuff from the corner store." He reached out. His fingers brushed the crisp paper band of a $10,000 stack. In that moment, he wasn't a waiter. He wasn't an honest man. He was a father whose child was suffering. The temptation wasn't about greed. It was about love. His hand shook as he pulled the bundle toward him. But then he looked up. On the wall was a framed, faded photograph of his mother. She had worked 3 jobs to keep him in school, and she had died with only $20 in her bank account. But her name was clean. Marcus remembered the day he was 10 years old and found a wallet on the street. He had wanted to buy a toy, but his mother had walked him 3 miles to the police station to return it. "Marcus," she had told him that day, "money can be earned, but a soul once sold can never be bought back. Sleep with a clear conscience, even if you sleep on a floor." Marcus looked back at the money. If he took even a single dollar, the story he told Maya every night about being a good man would become a lie. He would be teaching her that honesty has a price tag. He pushed the bundle back into the suitcase and slammed it shut. He wouldn't touch it, not a cent. He spent the rest of the night sitting against the front door, the suitcase under his legs, a kitchen knife in his hand. He was a starving man guarding a king's ransom. Every creak of the floorboards, every shout from the street below made his heart jump. He realized then that wealth didn't bring peace, it brought a different kind of war. As the gray light of dawn began to bleed through the curtains, Marcus saw something he hadn't noticed before. Stuck to the bottom of the suitcase was a small white envelope. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was no name, just a hand-drawn map to a private estate on the edge of the city, and a single sentence written in elegant calligraphy. "The final choice is yours. 8 a.m." Marcus looked at the clock. It was 6:30 a.m. He had no money for a taxi, and he was too weak to run. But he stood up, kissed Maya's forehead, and stepped back out into the cold morning air. He had a debt to return, and his soul was the only thing he had left to protect. The 5-mile walk to the estate felt like 50. Every step Marcus took was a battle against his own body. His legs felt like lead, and his head throbbed from the 2-day fast. He clutched the suitcase to his chest, the weight of the $5 million pulling him downward. People in expensive cars drove past him, splashing puddles of cold rain onto his worn-out shoes.
never imagining that the tired black man on the sidewalk was carrying enough cash to buy their entire neighborhood. As he reached the outskirts of the city, the buildings grew taller and the gates grew more imposing. Finally, he stood before a massive iron gate. Behind it lay a sprawling estate, a mansion made of white marble and glass that looked like it belonged in a movie. This was the address from the envelope. Marcus pressed the intercom. His voice was barely a whisper. "I'm Marcus from the restaurant. I have something that belongs to the gentleman from table 4. There was a long silence. Then the heavy gates groaned open. Marcus walked up the long, winding driveway, his heart beating so hard he could feel it in his throat. At the top of the marble stairs stood 2 men in black suits. They didn't say a word, they simply gestured for him to follow. The interior of the house was breathtaking. Gold-leafed ceilings, original paintings, and the scent of expensive sandalwood. It was a world Marcus had only seen through the windows of the restaurants where he served. They led him to a massive library where floor-to-ceiling shelves held thousands of books. In the center of the room, sitting in a high-backed leather chair, was the man from the restaurant. But he was no longer a beggar. Gone was the stained trench coat and the split shoes. He was wearing a bespoke, charcoal gray suit that cost more than Marcus's apartment building. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and on his wrist was a watch that shimmered under the chandelier. "You're late, Marcus," the man said, checking his watch. But his voice wasn't cold. It was the same deep cello vibration from the night before. Marcus didn't care about the luxury. He walked forward and placed the suitcase on the mahogany desk between them. With trembling hands, he pushed it toward the billionaire. "Here," Marcus panted, his breath coming in short gasps. "I haven't touched a single cent. I didn't even use it to buy a piece of bread, and God knows I wanted to." The billionaire didn't even look at the suitcase. He kept his eyes fixed on Marcus. "Why did you come all this way on foot? You could have taken a bundle, caught a taxi, and bought yourself a feast. No one would have known. My security cameras didn't see you leave the restaurant with it." Marcus stood tall, despite the dizziness. "I would have known, sir. And my daughter, Maya, she would have been raised by a thief. I'd rather she be raised by a hungry man than a rich criminal." The billionaire stood up and walked around the desk. He was a powerful figure, radiating authority. He reached out and opened the suitcase. He took out a single bundle of $100 bills and held it out to Marcus. "Take it," the man commanded. "This is for your honesty." Marcus looked at the money, then shook his head. "I didn't bring it back for a reward, sir. I brought it back because it wasn't mine. I don't want your charity." The billionaire laughed, a rich, genuine sound. "Charity, Marcus? You still don't understand. This wasn't a lost suitcase. This was an interview." He walked to the window, looking out over his vast gardens. "My name is Arthur Sterling. I own the Golden Plate and 20 other restaurants in this city. I'm old, Marcus. I have no sons, no daughters, and my lawyers are all sharks waiting for me to die so they can scavenge my empire. I've been looking for one thing for 5 years, an honest man who knows what it's like to have nothing, yet refuses to lose his soul." Marcus stared at him, his mind spinning. "An interview?" "Yesterday," Sterling continued, "you served a beggar with the respect you'd give a king. Last night, you guarded $5 million in a slum while your stomach was empty. You passed the test that men in silk suits have failed 1,000 times." Sterling turned back to Marcus, his expression serious. "I don't want to give you a reward. I want to give you a job, but not as a waiter."
Marcus felt the room spin, not from hunger this time, but from the sheer weight of Arthur Sterling's words. A job?
Marcus whispered, gripping the edge of the mahogany desk to stay upright. "Sir, I'm just a waiter. I don't know anything about running empires." Arthur smiled, a cold, sharp glint in his eyes. "I can hire 1,000 MBAs to do math, Marcus, but I can't buy a conscience. You have what they lack, a heart that doesn't have a price tag." He walked to a wall safe, pulled out a legal document, and signed it with a flourish. "As of this moment, you are the executive director of the Sterling Foundation. Your first task? To oversee the golden plate and audit every soul working there. You start today." But before Marcus could celebrate, Arthur's face turned serious. "But first, we eat. A man cannot lead an empire on an empty stomach." An hour later, Marcus was sitting in the back of a black Rolls-Royce, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that Arthur had insisted he wear. His stomach was finally full, but his mind was on Maya. He had already sent a private medical team to his apartment to care for her and move her to a private clinic. For the first time in years, Marcus didn't feel like a man drowning. He felt like a man who had finally reached the shore. The car pulled up to the front of the Golden Plate, the same restaurant where, 12 hours ago, Marcus had been scrubbing floors and hiding a suitcase in a closet. As Marcus stepped out of the luxury car, the valet, the same man who usually ignored Marcus, bowed deeply, not recognizing the waiter in the expensive suit and dark sunglasses. Marcus walked through the front doors. The atmosphere inside was tense. The manager, Steve, and the head waiter, Julian, were standing near the bar, looking frantic. "Where is that useless Marcus? He didn't show up for his shift. I'm gonna fire him and make sure he never works in this city again. And that old beggar from last night? I think he stole something. We need to call the police." Marcus walked closer, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. Julian noticed him first. He didn't recognize Marcus at first glance. "Sir, welcome. A table for one? Our finest booth is available," Julian said with a fake, oily smile. Marcus took off his sunglasses and looked Julian straight in the eye. The color drained from Julian's face. He stumbled back, his mouth hanging open. "Marcus? Is that you?" Steve, the manager, stormed over. "Marcus, what is this costume? Where have you been? You're fired. Get out of here before I call security." Marcus didn't flinch. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a gold-embossed folder. He laid it on the bar. "Actually, Steve, there's been a change in management. Arthur Sterling has promoted me. I'm not here for my shift. I'm here for your keys." Steve laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "You? Executive director? You're a waiter. You're a nobody." "I was a nobody when I was serving that beggar last night," Marcus said, his voice calm but like steel. "But that beggar was Arthur Sterling. He saw how you treated him. He saw how you talked about the poor. And most importantly, he saw that while I was hungry, I was still honest." The entire restaurant went silent. The wealthy diners stopped eating, watching the drama unfold. Steve's hands began to shake as he opened the folder. His eyes darted across the legal documents, seeing Arthur Sterling's unmistakable signature. "Julian," Marcus said, turning to the head waiter, "you told me that kindness was a waste of time. Today, you're going to learn that it's the only thing that lasts." The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Steve, the manager, looked at the keys in his hand and then at Marcus, the man he had spent months belittling. With a trembling hand, Steve placed the keys on the bar. He and Julian walked out of the revolving doors, not as kings of their small empire, but as men who had finally been held accountable for their cruelty. Marcus didn't feel a sense of petty revenge. He felt a profound sense of relief. He turned to the remaining staff,
the dishwashers, the junior waiters, and the cleaning crew who were watching from the kitchen doors with wide eyes. "Listen to me," Marcus announced, his voice steady and filled with authority. "From today, this restaurant will not just be a place for the rich to eat. We will start a community table program. Every night, the first 10 tables are reserved for those who cannot pay. We will serve them the same steak, the same wine, and give them the same respect as a billionaire. Because at this table, everyone is a human being first." The staff erupted into applause. For the first time, the Grand Bistro felt like it had a soul. But Marcus's journey wasn't complete until he reached the city's top private hospital. He walked into the VIP suite, no longer smelling of grease and old food, but of success and hope. Maya was sitting up in bed, her fever gone, her cheeks rosy. She was eating a bowl of fresh fruit, something they could never have afforded just 24 hours ago. "Daddy!" she cried, her eyes lighting up. "The doctor said we're moving to a big house with a garden. Is it true?" Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and hugged her tight. "It's true, Maya. We're never going to be cold or hungry again. Your daddy found a suitcase, but more importantly, he found himself." The story ends a few months later. Marcus is standing on the balcony of his new office, overlooking the city. Arthur Sterling stands beside him, looking like a proud father. "You know, Marcus," Arthur said, looking at the bustling city below, "people told me I was crazy to give a waiter my keys. They said you'd take the money and run." Marcus smiled, looking at the gold-framed photo of his mother on his desk. "They forgot one thing, Mr. Sterling. A man who has been hungry for 2 days knows the value of a meal. But a man who has been honest his whole life knows the value of a soul." Marcus had gone from having $5 in his pocket to managing 500 million, but he still wore the same humble smile. He had proven that in a world where you can be anything, being kind and honest is the greatest wealth of all. Marcus's life changed because he chose integrity over a quick fix. He was starving, his daughter was sick, and he had $5 million in his hands, yet he didn't take a single penny. If you were in Marcus's shoes, starving, broke, and you found a suitcase with $5 million belonging to a man who looked like he didn't need it, would you have returned it, or would you have taken just one bundle to save your family? Tell us in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, make sure to hit that like button. It helps us bring more stories of hope and humanity to the world. Don't forget to subscribe to Move to Hope and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a life lesson. Remember, your kindness is a seed. Plant it today and watch your world change tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.